All right, here we are for PLC number 6. So Zulma, you want to go first?
Okay. Can you let me share my screen?
Oh,
Abby?
there we go.
Okay, let me try this again. Wait a second. Okay, this is my PLC number 6. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay. Okay, my 3 topics are universal grammar, representation of the 2 languages in 2 SLA theory of attention, but Schmidt noticing hypothesis, and Tondi and Villa, I think, theory of attention. Okay, the first one, universal grammar by Chomsky. Chomsky denoted that universal grammar is like an innate ability that human has, you know, or that we all possess for us to be like, to learn like an easier language. And Chomsky believed that we do have a universal grammar in our head, because it says that it's impossible for us to learn another language if we don't have that grammar in our head. As they explain it, like that's the way, I mean, the only way to, let's say, prove how the kids learn their language, like when they're little, when we start, like when we start talking. It says that it's so complex that it won't be easier for us just to learn it without a universal grammar running around in our head. Representation of the 2 language. I have it this way, okay? I think we did talk about bilingualism, and includes like coordinate and compound. Coordinate means like 2 languages are kept separate or different contexts, and compound bilingualism if the 2 languages are fused in the brain as a single context. When we talk about coordinate, okay, it's 2 languages are kept separately, different content, and they're taught and accessed separately. Like, for example, when the kids are learning English at the school, and then they use their native language like at home or where they are around, even when they go to around their community, like they go to church or they're going to play with another kids, they keep that language. And compound bilingual is the 2 languages are fused, like it says there in the brain, like in a single context, learning and speaking 2 different languages at the same time, okay? Using both language to communicate or do like an interaction every day. Coordinate bilinguals when kids learn English, like I said, at the school, and like in a separation in the form or an environment in which language is used. To SLA theory of attention, okay, we're talking about Smith with noticing hypothesis, which is input, intake, output, okay, and Tomlinson Villa theory of attention. These 2 talk about like noticing hypothesis is consciously attended to the distinguish of perception, and I have it here, I'm sorry, like noticing the gap, perception and noticing. Perception have not involved consciousness, and noticing have necessarily conscious. With Tomlin and Villa's theory of attention, they talk about like 3 maybe point of view, like alertness, orientation, and detention. Alertness means like when they're like how do I say this? Wait a second. When they're preparing or they kind of like wait on that stimulus or that input. And orientation is when they're looking to that target, like it's like you can see it here in this image that I'm trying to explain. This is the target. And detection, I'm sorry, is when learning take place. Detention could happen without alertness or orientation. Okay. That's all.
Okay, that was good, Zulma. Wally, were you able to get in?
It's telling me that you
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes, we can hear you now. Oh.
Okay, Wally, can you hear us? Abby, can you read that?
Where is she? I don't see anything. Is it in the chat?
No, it says that it's too low. I mean, it's too, maybe her internet is not working.
Oh, I see her video moving.
Wally, are you there?
Yes. I'm trying to talk to you, but AT&T is just giving me troubles, I guess.
Yes, it says that it's slowed. Network.
It keeps
slow.
telling me that. Well, AT&T, I have the Wi-Fi, I have everything. It's not working for me today, I guess. It's my turn.
Let's keep going.
And Abby is not letting me join.
I know. I'm trying to figure out. I removed you because you were on your phone, but now I can't figure out how to get you back for your email. Do you want to email me your presentation and I can share it on the screen?
Give me 1 second. I'm gonna do something. Hold on a second. I'm sorry. I'm killing your time. Let's see if this works, okay?
Okay.
Can
It's no work.
Phone. Do we have the, yes, I see. Hello. Come here. Hear me?
Yes.
Emma, can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, now you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Do you see what I'm sharing?
I just
trying this. Let's see. Okay, let's see if it works. 1, 2, 3.
Haha.
Does it work?
Yes.
Okay, so figure it out. Okay, so this is or PLC number 6. We are working cognitive aspect of second language from the book Understanding Second Language Acquisition by Ellis. This is chapter 8 in the book. And what I'm doing, the 3 topics I picked was attention, the 2 ESL theories of attention, and detection. When we talk about attention, we understand that attention is related to working capacity, and it's part of the memory. It's part of the human memory system. It has 2 purposes. Well, the first one is that it stores information temporarily in the phonological short-term memory, and it also, the second function is that it also connects this information to the long-term memory. That's all about attention. Also, when we talk about attention, we have Smith. Smith talked to any learning. And obviously, therefore, if there's not any learning, it's necessary to understand all aspects of a second language acquisition. Attention is necessary. Without attention, there will not be any acquisition. There are 6 key characteristics. That's what the picture is there for. Mainly what we're gonna point out is that attention is required to the process. It's required to process the stimuli from the input with the information found in the long-term memory. So we receive the information, we process it because we can connect that information. It takes place in the working memory. It's necessary or learning, and involve much more than just perception. It involves that we are connected. An example is learning in L2 to what they have learned previously in their L1. Second, the 2 areas of attention. We have the first Smith, who will the noticing theory, where he talks about personal conscience and noticing in his consciousness. The learning might perceive connection for the storage in the long-term memory. In other words, consciousness, we won't do the noticing, they won't. Schmidt first he had what it was called this. The learners can only learn what they have consciously attended. That back is say, no, well, maybe yes, not as much as if they're really paying attention. Which is kind of something they're gonna learn, but that's what he said. And, there is an input, there is and that's what the graph is there. Then willing and willingness. The phases is the alertness, the orientation, and the detection. The learning for it. The orientation is when you are ready to pay attention, where you are, okay, oh, the teacher's talking, let me listen to what she's talking. Then we have detection, sorry. That's the registration of the stimulus, and that's when it takes place. And this one can take place with or without the 2 previous ones. It's definitely an attention processes, and all these can take place, like I say, with or without awareness, but awareness itself is required because there is not attention. I'm sorry, there is not attention without awareness. Tomley and Villa, they argue that there can be attention, but there cannot be awareness. And that's where the points on common and difference between Tomley and Schmidt happen. Tomley and Villa say that they're not consciousness, there's not really necessary. Schmidt say yes, it is. Detection is equal perception. Tommy Abilan points out that the learner do for the processing of the information. That's when they have. That's what they say. He didn't address really what the information that the learner detect is gonna do with it. He just say it happens. So to work a little further with attention, information in short-term memory is the first stage of the theory of attention. As Schmidt said that attention is not the raw data, but it's still concrete. Therefore, it's local and not metalinguistic. The learner detect the input. So we're paying attention, we detect the information, but they have to take that token, they have to take the information and they have to connect the information to what they already have in their memory. So therefore, Schmidt say in 1994 that it does involve the form function mapping. Then he say that in 2001 that it does involve some, but not really. Therefore, there are a whole bunch of critics that came back and say one of them was Truscott and Charwood, who say, why is he contradicting himself? And they conclude that there is no such a thing that you have to understand. If not, there's no really noticing. Theory of the noticing the gap, you have to have understanding and you have to do use of the knowledge that you have. Students are just writing down notes, they are not really processing, and they're just listening to the lecture, and they are not really connecting the dots. For me, that's just the detection. They're just listening and writing down. They're not really, connecting the dots. Well, that's it for me.
Abby.
Okay, can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, that was
Yes, now yes.
Okay, Wally, you have, I mean,
Yes, ma'am.
we can hardly hear what you said, okay? You have to see the video. It sounds like like it's very slow. I don't know what happened. Like the same thing that happened to me last week. I'm sorry, Abby.
But since it's AT&T in the house and in the phone, that's what's happening. Go ahead, Abby.
You're good. It was still good. I read all your little things and they were still good. And I can understand some of what you said. So PLC number 6, cognitive aspects of SLA. We did chapter 8 in our books. And the book is by Rod Ellis, Understanding Second Language Acquisition. So some of the topics that I'm going to talk about today are overshadowing and blocking, connectionism, and the processability theory. And I've got my little brain right here because all of this is inside of our brains. It's what happens cognitively when we are learning a second language. Okay, overshadowing and blocking. This one was probably my favorite one that we read about. And it is a theory by N. Ellis in 2006 that he came up with. And basically, he says overshadowing is the process in which a feature of the L1 appears to be stronger than or better than the feature of the L2. So basically saying that instead of if you have something similar, something that the two languages share, you're going to be prone to pick the one that is more salient, which means it makes more sense to you, which would obviously be your native language. So L1, that kind of form, instead of picking the form that is very similar but not exactly the same in your L2. And so then what occurs when that starts happening and you have two forms that are really similar and you pick your L1, which is incorrect, then blocking occurs after overshadowing. And that's when an element of L2 is overshadowed and the learner begins to block out that specific element because to them that doesn't make sense to them in their brain because their brain has been processing their L1 for that whole time. And so now they're going to have trouble seeing that L2 concept as something that could make sense in a form that could be possible. And so it's going to start blocking that for them. And a classroom example is a learner choosing to use one form of grammar over another because one form is more common in their L1. So for example, whenever I speak Spanish, I prefer to say like the ando o yendo at the end instead of putting future tense. And while it might not always make sense, it's easier for me because in my first language, that's how I've conjugated like forever. And so it's harder for me to pull that future tense out. And so my L1 is overshadowing and therefore blocking that future tense sometimes whenever I'm speaking Spanish. Okay. The second one is connectionism. And this one is a theory by Hustelgen, I think that's how you say it, in 2002. This one was my favorite in connectionism versus symbolism. I believe on more of the connectionist side of things that I think there are no rules in language whenever you're learning a language. It's just the strength of association. Because I think about my students and other immigrants, they didn't sit in school forever. All the time learning here are the rules of English. You have to depend on what you know and your explicit knowledge before you get your implicit knowledge. It's actually the opposite, that we depend a lot more on our implicit knowledge and what we learn on our own and then use our explicit knowledge to add to that and put rules to that. But I think that whenever you're first learning a language, you're making connections by associating things in your brain. Oh, these words mean, can I go to the bathroom? Oh, that's what I'm going to do. It's not somebody teaching you, here's how you say can, and here's how you put it in an inverted question style. You just learn it because you see it in society. It's implicit knowledge. And so I just said this, but the majority of the learner's knowledge is represented by connections that the learner has made in their mind rather than symbols. And a common example is when students in the classrooms that are beginner learners recognize that certain sounds or phrases mean certain things. So for example, when the teacher says sit down, at first they might not understand what they're saying and they might not understand that that's a command. Because that's a rule in the English language, we have commands. They just would understand that means to sit in their seat. And so they're making a connection by seeing everybody else doing it. They're having those associations in their mind. Okay, and then my last one is the processability theory. And I like this because I'm a rule follower and I like to have it all laid out on paper so I can understand it. And so this helps me because this theory was brought about by Pieneman in 2005. And he says this is the hierarchy in which we acquire different levels of structure or grammar of language. And so I think this is great because I really liked what Krashen had earlier in the chapters that we'd read about how we acquire different elements of language and grammar in different orders. And so this is kind of the same thing. And so I have it right here in my book. And he says level 1 is words. So basically what words mean and what chunks of words mean, like I just said, when we're having connectionism together, we're going to process words first. Okay, well, paper means this. And I'll hold up a piece of paper. Paper means this. And so that way we process those first. And then we're going to process our category procedures. So basically number and possession. So that's mine, or there are 5 ducks, or things like that. And then phrasal procedures, which is going to be like the S at the end of the word, different structures, different grammatical structures. And then the 4th one's gonna be the word order rule. And then the 5th one is just gonna be subordinate clauses and more of the complicated rules of grammar that we have. But that's the processability theory. And they said it's only based on production, but I do think that it provides predictive power, like they said in the book, because even though this is only based on production and we can't actually open everybody's brains up and see what's going on in the inside, I think that this gives us a good idea of what we can predict that a student would know, and that this is based off of research and based off of study. And I think that we can say that it definitely is easier for us to learn the easier concepts before we have to learn the hard ones. And as we are all second language learners, I think we can all relate to, yeah, I mean, I learned what a word was before I learned how to put it in a sentence. So a classroom example that I have is a student would not be able to acquire the past tense form of like ed in English before the present tense form of verbs. So they would say like, I'm trying to think of one that has ed. I'm thinking of all the regular ones right now.
Learn it.
Yes, I learn. And they wouldn't say I learned before they say I learn. And so that's the processability theory. And that's all that I have.
Okay, can you hear me now, or the same?
No, you're good. You're good now.
I had to unplug the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi was messing up the whole scene. Anyway, okay, so we had agreed that the 5 topics that we all think are the most important ones are: 1, representation of 2 languages; 2, overshadowing and blocking because it's part of the representation of 2 languages. Then the number 3, the 2 SLA theories of attention. Then number 4, attention versus detection, or same or equal, how do we want to name it? And number 5, processability theory. We're going to start with the number 1 for us, which is the representation of 2 languages, and that's going to be Abby and Sulma. Go ahead, take the lead, babe.
Okay, Abby, let me leave this right now, please. Okay. It's part about, like I said before, like bilingualism is the ability of a person to communicate in 2 languages. Okay, we have coordinate bilingualism, which is the 2 languages and kept separately, stored and access to separately, like Spanish in one place and English in another place. Compound is the 2 languages that I fuse in the brains. They have no dividing line, okay? And it's the two languages are spoken at the same time. The child can grow talking, or I mean, it could go, child grows and is exposed to both languages at home, like speaking both language at the same time. Go ahead, Abby.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. That I think this comes up in almost every chapter, that we talk about that languages aren't separate, that they are one system together. And I think that really ties into like why overshadowing, blocking, our second one, is a thing, because if we were to say that 2 languages were separate, then there would be no overshadowing. If they were separate, we would be able to keep them in one box and in one box, and there would be any interference. But overshadowing and blocking happens because all of our languages together in one system. And that's why it can be so hard to learn a different language, because you've been trained to speak one way from your very, very young age. And now all these other things that sound similar, but they're not quite right, or like entering your brain, and you're like, what is going on? And your brain is like, how do I deal with this? And overshadowing and blocking really comes into play whenever we think about our representation of two languages, because it's important to remember that they're all together, and that's why we have that blocking going on.
And it's so funny that you guys talk about the overshadow and blocking, because like for my child, and I'm sure it happened to you, Abby, when he's as my oldest, when he's talking about colors, for him, black is always blanco. It takes him a second for him to, okay, no, I'm sorry, negro.
Yep.
But he, in his mind, black is blanco. And like, no, babe. Oh, he's like, no, sorry, negro, mommy. And the other one is always, I think, Sulma, you probably have had that situation at one point, embarrassing.
Oh.
Or sympathy, the word sympathy. I think I told you guys the first time I was taking classes, for me, I feel your sympathy. And she's like, what? The professor that day, I'm like, no sympathy. I'm sorry. Because it's what you're saying. You are connecting the language to what you have before, and it's overchat. It's there. It's blocking.
Or what you know. But
it's that blocking is the first thing it comes, because it's what you have taught the most. For Abby, just like my oldest, blancos is phonetically is for them it's a cognate, but no, it's a false cognate. But when you're talking, it's a little difficult to think about that. Okay, Abby, I'm sorry, I interrupt you.
No, you're good. We can move on to number 3.
Okay, Sulma and I, we were talking about the 2 SLA theories of attention. One was presented by Schmidt, and it was the noticing hypothesis, or noticing the gap. And he had 2 presentations. He presented one which was a strong one, where he said that without consciousness, there is no learning, which I sort of kind of agree. And if they're not really paying that much attention, there's something that's going to stick to them. But to be honest to you, how much is that something? How much of that something is really going to... Then, Sulma, you want to talk about the other theory?
No. Go ahead and keep. I wasn't listening.
No, you want to go and talk about Tomlin and Villa?
Okay, yes. Okay, yes. Okay. This Tomlin and Villa's theory of attention, he talked about like 3 they use like, is it like 3 elements or 3 point of view, like, which is alertness, orientation, and detection. And these 3 could be without awareness. Okay. And I like alertness is like, this is what I'm like where the stimulus or receiving the input of the stimulus receiving. Orientation is like looking for that gap, or look like right straight to that how do I say this, to that target. And the attention is where cognitive representation happen in the working memory, and it's where the learnings take place. It says that the attention could be without it could happen without alertness and orientation. These 2 theory, like noticing hypothesis and Tomlin and Villa's, I don't know if I'm saying the right thing, Tomlin and Villa's theory of attention, it seems to be like contradiction, or kind of,
a little contradiction, because Schmidt keeps saying that it has to be consciousness, while Tomlin and Villa kept saying no, they don't need consciousness.
This is what I'm going to. It says like Tomlin and Villa's attention does not necessarily need to be include consciousness, and Schmidt say that it has to be conscious. Okay, like to get that attention. But if we look at it, like Twombly and Viv, they talk about alertness and orientation, and somehow they're related or closely related to Smith when he said incidental or intentional learning. Okay, so to be alert, to attend, okay, it will get you closely oriented. So that involve intentional learning. Okay, if there is not alert to attend or orientate, incidental attention will happen. Like I say, the attention is happen to be as a person. There is disagree that it can be unconsciously. The attention not require awareness, and perception not involve consciousness. So
It's kind of
at the end, like at the
confusing.
no, it's like at the
It came back and say, well, maybe there's some learning happening
it's
without
a little bit,
consciousness.
yes.
Just a little, and that's why when topic number 4 came along, attention and detection. What is it? What, Abby, you with me, baby, in this one, right?
Yeah.
Because we were kind of talking about it before. The same and detention. I feel like detection is the first thing to attention. They are pretty similar. If you don't have attention, you cannot have detection. And without detection, is there really no attention? So for me, that I think that's why we all agree that they both together have to be or number 4, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Too, because I feel like if you're detecting something, that's more of an unconscious process, and then attention is like more of a conscious process. But I also feel like they can be the same thing, because sometimes you pay attention to things and it's kind of unconscious. You're kind of just like the noticing hypothesis, you're noticing the gap, but you're not like paying full attention to it, but you're like, oh yeah, you're not like trying to. So I think that it's really important to consider attention. And like with that being said, going on to our 5th topic of the processability theory, we have to know what to push our students' attention to at the right time. Because we can't always just push their attention to, okay, this is past tense, this is future tense, this is present tense, like when we need to be focusing on just the one word. Because their brains are going to go pew, like Wally just said. And so I think that that just ties a bow on everything, because we have to understand what stages our students are at in order to understand what their attention span will hold. But I think that's pretty much all that we have for our PLC 6.